After my husband died in a car crash, I had to remarry because I had a 2-year-old daughter. So as soon as I married Luke, at first he was fine, but after some time he started ignoring her. Whenever she cried, he shouted, "Get that nuisance away from me." When I confronted him, he shouted, "She's not mine, why should I care? Tell her to stop begging for attention, I'm tired of this drama." When I called my parents and discussed my situation, they said, "Well, you shouldn't have remarried then, and don't you dare show up at our house." I stayed silent, and one day I did something which left all of them pale. My name is Beth, and this is the story of how I went from being a desperate widow to someone who learned that sometimes, the best revenge is patience and perfect timing. It all started 4 years ago when my husband Mark died in a horrific car accident. I was 25, suddenly a single mother to my beautiful 2-year-old daughter Anna, and completely lost. Mark had been everything to me, my high school sweetheart, my best friend, and the most devoted father Anna could have asked for. He used to sing her to sleep every night with this silly song he made up about a princess and her dragon friend. When he died, Anna kept asking for Daddy's dragon song, and I would cry myself to sleep after tucking her in. The financial reality hit me like a freight train. Mark's life insurance barely covered the funeral costs and outstanding medical bills from the accident. I was working part-time as a dental receptionist, making barely enough to cover rent on our tiny apartment, let alone daycare, groceries, and all the expenses that come with raising a toddler. My savings were depleted within 6 months. That's when my parents first showed their true colors. When I called them, sobbing, explaining that I might lose the apartment and needed help, my mother's response was ice cold. "Beth, your father and I raised you to be independent. We're not a bank. You made your choices, and now you need to figure it out." My father was even worse, suggesting that maybe I should consider giving Anna up for adoption temporarily until I got back on my feet. The conversation ended with me hanging up, shaking with rage and disbelief. I was working 60-hour weeks between 2 jobs, barely seeing Anna, who was being watched by Mrs. Chen, our elderly neighbor who refused to take more than $20 a day. Anna was beginning to withdraw, barely speaking, and I knew I was failing her as a mother. The guilt was eating me alive. That's when I met Luke Morrison at the coffee shop where I'd picked up a weekend job. He was 32, a successful accountant with his own practice, and he seemed genuinely kind. He noticed I looked exhausted and started buying me coffee during my breaks. Luke had never been married, claimed he'd been waiting for the right person, and when he met Anna, who was now 3 years old, he was wonderful with her. During our courtship, Luke was everything Mark wasn't in terms of financial stability. He took us to nice restaurants, bought Anna little gifts, and even learned Mark's dragon song to sing to her. He proposed after 6 months, and I said yes, not just because I loved him, but because Anna needed stability. She needed a father figure, and Luke seemed perfect for the role. We had a small wedding ceremony at the courthouse. My parents didn't come. They said they were disappointed in how quickly I was remarrying and that it was disrespectful to Mark's memory. Luke's parents lived across the country and couldn't make it, but they sent a lovely card and promised to visit soon. The first few months of marriage were blissful. Luke began the legal adoption process for Anna, which would take several months to complete through the courts, and we moved into his beautiful 4-bedroom house in Maplewood, a quiet suburb with excellent schools. Anna, now 4 years old, had her own room, decorated with princess themes, and a huge backyard to play in. Luke would come home from work and play with her, help with bath time, and read her bedtime stories. I thought we were building the perfect family. The change started gradually, about 10 months into our marriage. Luke began working later hours, claiming his practice was expanding. He'd come home tired and irritable, barely acknowledging Anna when she ran to greet him. When I'd ask him to help with her bedtime routine, he'd sigh heavily and say, "Beth, I've been working all day. Can't you handle it?" Then Anna went through a phase where she had nightmares and would cry in the middle of the night. The first time it happened after Luke started acting distant, he stormed out of our bedroom and shouted down the hall, "Get that nuisance away from me. Some of us have to work in the morning." I was shocked. I'd never heard him speak about Anna that way. When I confronted him the next morning, Luke was dismissive. "Beth, she's manipulating you. She's old enough to sleep through the night. You're babying her." But Anna was only 3 years old, still processing the trauma of losing her biological father and adjusting to a new family dynamic. His lack of empathy was jarring. The situation deteriorated rapidly. Luke stopped participating in any activities with Anna. No more bedtime stories, no more playing in the backyard, no more family dinners. He'd eat first, alone, then disappear into his home office. When Anna tried to show him her drawings or ask him to play, he'd barely look up from his phone. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning when Anna spilled her cereal on the kitchen floor. She was 5 by then, and it was clearly an accident. She immediately started crying, saying sorry, Daddy Luke. But instead of comforting her, Luke exploded. "I'm tired of this drama. He screamed, his face red with rage. She's not mine. Why should I care? Tell her to stop begging for attention. Anna ran to her room, sobbing, and I followed Luke to the living room. What is wrong with you? I demanded. She's a little girl, and you adopted her. Legally and emotionally, she is yours. Luke turned on me with a coldness I'd never seen before. I made a mistake, he said flatly. I thought I could handle being a stepfather, but I can't. She reminds me every day that you loved someone else first, that I'm just your consolation prize. I want my house back. I want my life back. I was stunned into silence. This was the man who had sung Mark's dragon song to my daughter, who had promised to love and protect her as his own. Luke, we're married. Anna calls you daddy. You can't just decide you don't want to be a father anymore. Watch me, he replied, and walked away. Desperate and scared, I called my parents that night after Anna was asleep. Surely they would understand that I needed help, that their granddaughter was being emotionally abused by the man who was supposed to protect her. My mother answered on the third ring. Beth? It's late. Mom, I need help, I began, and poured out everything that had been happening. Luke's emotional withdrawal, his cruel comments about Anna, the way he was treating a child who had already lost so much. There was a long pause before my mother responded. Well, you shouldn't have remarried then, she said, her voice dripping with judgment. We told you it was too soon, that you were being selfish. And don't you dare show up at our house. We're not cleaning up another one of your messes. My father took the phone. Beth, you made your bed. Now you have to lie in it? That girl isn't our problem anymore, she's Luke's problem now. Maybe if you'd waited longer, been more careful, you wouldn't be in this situation. They hung up on me. My own parents had abandoned Anna and me completely. That night, I sat in Anna's room watching her sleep, and I realized I was truly alone. But as I sat there, something hardened inside me. If I was going to protect my daughter, I needed to be smarter, more strategic than I'd ever been before. The next morning, I started documenting everything. I bought a small digital recorder and began keeping audio logs of Luke's outbursts. I took photos of Anna's tear-stained face after his cruel comments. I started a private email account and sent myself detailed records of every incident, creating an electronic paper trail with timestamps. I also started researching Luke's business. As an accountant, he handled finances for several local small businesses and some individual wealthy clients. I noticed he was working more hours, but our household income hadn't increased proportionally. When I casually asked about his new clients over dinner, Luke became evasive and defensive. One evening, while Luke was in the shower, I saw his laptop was open to his email. I know it was wrong, but something made me look. What I found changed everything. Luke had been embezzling money from his clients. Not huge amounts that would be immediately noticed, but small, consistent sums that added up to significant theft over time. He had emails discussing these accounting adjustments with someone named Marcus, who seemed to be helping him cover his tracks. The total amount was over $200,000 from at least 6 different clients. But that wasn't the worst part. I found emails between Luke and a woman named Jessica Chen. Yes, Mrs. Chen's daughter, the woman who had been watching Anna when I was working multiple jobs. They had been having an affair for months, starting just 2 months after our wedding. The emails were explicit, and in one of them, Luke wrote, "Once I get rid of the dead husband baggage, we can be together properly. The kid is a problem, but I'm working on that too." I printed everything. Every email, every financial document I could access, every piece of evidence of his fraud and adultery. I also discovered that Luke had been planning to divorce me and claim I was an unfit mother, using Anna's nightmares and my long work hours as evidence of neglect. He intended to get full custody of Anna and then immediately surrender her to the state, claiming he couldn't handle being a single father. The plan was diabolical. He would look like the responsible stepfather who tried his best, I would look like the unstable widow who couldn't handle motherhood, and Anna would end up in foster care while he ran off with Jessica. All while he continued stealing money from his clients to fund their new life together. I spent weeks verifying everything I'd found. I traced the embezzled funds to offshore accounts Luke had opened. I documented the affair with photographs of Luke and Jessica meeting at hotels. I even hired a private investigator with money I'd been saving for Anna's college fund. It was the best investment I ever made. The investigator, a former police detective named Ray Fisher, was thorough. He confirmed Luke's financial crimes were even more extensive than I'd discovered. Luke had been running this embezzlement scheme for over 2 years, starting before he even met me. Ray also uncovered that Luke had done this before. He'd been married briefly in his 20s to a woman with a young son, and the marriage had ended similarly, with Luke abandoning the family after a year. "Your husband is a predator," Ray told me during our final meeting. "He specifically targets vulnerable single mothers, gains their trust, then uses their children as leverage. The embezzlement funds his lifestyle until he's ready to move on to the next victim. Based on what I've found, he's been running variations of this scheme for over 5 years. Armed with this information, I developed my plan. It had to be perfect, because I would only get one chance. But first, I needed to secure Anna's immediate safety and document everything more thoroughly. I started by enrolling Anna in a new preschool program 3 days a week, telling Luke it was a special enrichment program that would help with her social development. In reality, it was a safe space where Anna could be away from Luke's increasing hostility, and where trained professionals could observe any behavioral changes that might indicate abuse. The teachers, Mrs. Rodriguez and Miss Kate, were wonderful with Anna and began noting improvements in her confidence when she was away from home. During this time, I also began seeing a family counselor, Dr. Evelyn Morse, under the guise of helping Anna process her grief over losing Mark. Dr. Reeves was a mandated reporter, which meant if Luke's behavior escalated to physical abuse, there would be professional documentation. More importantly, she began working with Anna on coping strategies and helped me understand the psychological impact of Luke's emotional abuse. Anna is showing classic signs of a child walking on eggshells, Dr. Reeves explained during one of our sessions. She's becoming hypervigilant, trying to predict and prevent adult anger. This kind of chronic stress can have lasting developmental impacts if it continues. I recorded our sessions with Dr. Reeves' permission, creating another layer of professional documentation about Luke's treatment of Anna. The counselor also taught me techniques for protecting Anna's emotional well-being while I worked on my longer-term plan. Meanwhile, Luke's behavior continued to deteriorate. He started staying out later, claiming he was networking with potential clients, but I suspected he was spending time with Jessica. He also began making increasingly cruel comments about Anna in front of her. One particularly awful evening, Anna had drawn a picture at preschool of our family, her, me, Luke, and Mark watching from a cloud above. She was so proud of it and ran to show Luke when he came home from work. "Daddy Luke, look. I drew our family," she said excitedly, holding up her crayon masterpiece. Luke barely glanced at it. "Why is the dead guy in the picture?" he asked coldly. "He's not part of this family anymore." Anna's face crumpled. "But Daddy, Mark is still my daddy in heaven," she whispered. "Anna, Mark is gone," Luke said harshly. "Stop living in the past. It's pathetic." I quickly intervened, scooping Anna up and taking her to the kitchen for a snack, but the damage was done. That night, Anna cried herself to sleep, and I sat in her room recording everything Luke had said into my phone. The financial investigation became more complex as I dug deeper into Luke's business practices. I discovered he had been using a sophisticated system of double bookkeeping, maintaining one set of records for his legitimate transactions and another for his embezzlement activities. He'd been particularly clever about targeting clients who were too busy or trusting to scrutinize their monthly statements carefully. I also learned that Luke had been forging signatures on financial documents and had created false vendor accounts to funnel money into his personal accounts. The scope of his fraud was staggering. He'd stolen approximately $275,000 over 3 years, with the thefts increasing in frequency and amount as he became more confident in his methods. During this investigation period, I had to maintain the facade of being a loving, unsuspecting wife. I cooked Luke's favorite meals, asked about his day, and pretended to believe his explanations about working late. It was exhausting, but I knew any suspicion on his part could jeopardize Anna's safety in my plan. The most challenging part was protecting Anna from witnessing Luke's worst behavior while still gathering evidence. I started keeping Anna occupied with activities in different parts of the house when Luke was home, but sometimes his outbursts were unavoidable. One Saturday morning, Anna accidentally knocked over Luke's coffee while trying to show him a puzzle she'd completed. The coffee spilled on some papers he'd been reviewing, and Luke exploded with rage. "You stupid little brat!" he screamed, grabbing Anna's arm roughly. "Can't you watch where you're going? You've ruined important documents." Anna started crying, and I immediately stepped between them. "Luke, she's 5 years old. It was an accident. She's old enough to not be so clumsy," he snarled. "And she's old enough to clean up her own messes." He shoved paper towels at Anna, who was still sobbing. "Clean it up. Now." I wanted to protect Anna from having to clean up while she was crying, but I also needed Luke to continue revealing his true nature. I helped Anna with the cleanup while secretly recording the entire incident on my phone. That night, after Anna was asleep, I called Ray Fisher, my private investigator, and played him the recording. "Ray, I need to know, if Luke's treatment escalates, what are my legal options for protecting Anna?" "Beth, what you've recorded today could be considered emotional abuse," Ray said grimly. "If he puts his hands on her again, even roughly like that, it becomes physical. You need to be prepared to call the police immediately if that happens." Ray also helped me understand the legal timeline I was working with. "Once you expose Luke's financial crimes, he'll likely be arrested quickly," he explained. You need to have all your evidence compiled and all your safety measures in place before that happens, because he'll probably figure out you're the one who turned him in. This motivated me to accelerate my timeline. I began making copies of everything: financial documents, email correspondence, audio recordings, photographs, and storing them in multiple locations. I gave copies to Ray, stored some in a safety deposit box Anna and I could access, and uploaded encrypted files to a secure cloud storage account. I also started preparing Anna for the possibility that Luke might not be living with us much longer. I couldn't tell her the whole truth, but I began having gentle conversations about how sometimes grown-ups make bad choices and have consequences for those choices. "Mommy," Anna asked one evening while I was braiding her hair, "is Daddy Luke going to leave us like Daddy Mark did?" The question broke my heart because it showed how perceptive she was about the tension in our house. "Sweetie, Daddy Mark didn't choose to leave us. He had an accident. But sometimes when people aren't being kind to each other, they do need to live in different places. Would we be okay if it was just you and me again?" she asked quietly. "Anna, you and I are a team," I told her, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "We've always been okay together, and we always will be. No matter what happens, I will always take care of you." She nodded solemnly, and I realized she understood more about our situation than I'd given her credit for. Meanwhile, I was also dealing with the emotional toll of planning to destroy my husband's life. Despite his treatment of Anna and me, despite discovering his crimes and infidelity, there were moments when I doubted myself. Luke had been kind to us in the beginning, and I sometimes wondered if there was any way to save our marriage without going to such extreme measures. Dr. Reeves helped me work through these conflicted feelings during our family sessions. "Beth, you're experiencing something common among abuse victims," she explained. "It's called trauma bonding. The fact that Luke was initially kind makes his current cruelty more psychologically confusing. But you have to remember that his kindness was a manipulation tactic, not genuine love." She also helped me understand that I wasn't just protecting Anna from current harm, but from future trauma. Children who grow up in emotionally abusive environments often struggle with relationships, self-worth, and emotional regulation as adults, Dr. Reeves explained. By removing Anna from this situation now, you're potentially saving her from years of therapy and healing later in life. The counseling sessions also revealed more about how Luke's treatment was affecting Anna. She began having separation anxiety when I dropped her off at preschool, worried that Luke would be angry if she wasn't home when he arrived from work. She started asking permission before speaking, even to me, and would flinch slightly when men raised their voices, even in normal conversation. These behavioral changes strengthened my resolve and eliminated any remaining doubts about my plan. As I gathered more evidence about Luke's affair with Jessica, I discovered their relationship was even more calculated than I'd initially realized. Jessica had been reporting back to Luke about my activities during the period when I was working multiple jobs and her mother was watching Anna. She told Luke about my work schedule, my financial struggles, and my emotional state during those vulnerable months. I found emails where Jessica described me as desperate and grateful and suggested that Luke could easily manipulate the situation to his advantage. She'd even provided Luke with details about Anna's bedtime routine and her attachment to Mark's memory, information he'd used to initially bond with her. The betrayal went deeper than just an affair. Jessica had been helping Luke prey on my family from the very beginning. This discovery helped me realize that Luke's behavior wasn't just a case of a man who'd bitten off more than he could chew with stepfatherhood. He was a predator who had specifically targeted Anna and me because we were vulnerable, and he'd had inside information about our situation from Jessica and her mother. I decided Jessica needed to face consequences for her role in our victimization, not just receive a slap on the wrist for the affair. Through Ray's investigation, I learned that Jessica worked as a bookkeeper for several small businesses in town. If she was willing to help Luke spy on and manipulate a grieving widow and orphan child, I wondered what other ethical lines she might be willing to cross in her professional life. Ray discovered that Jessica had been embezzling from her employers as well, using techniques similar to Luke's but on a smaller scale. She'd been stealing approximately $600 to $900 monthly from 3 different small businesses over the past 2 years, falsifying expense reports and creating fake vendor payments that went directly to her personal account. "Beth, these two were running a broader criminal operation," Ray explained during one of our meetings. Luke was handling the major thefts from his accounting clients, while Jessica was skimming from her bookkeeping clients. They were probably planning to disappear together once they'd stolen enough money. This information became another crucial piece of my evidence file. As my plan neared execution, I found myself having increasingly vivid dreams about Mark. In these dreams, he would hold Anna and tell me I was doing the right thing to protect her. "You're stronger than you know, Beth," dream Mark would say. "Anna needs you to be fierce for her." I took these dreams as a sign that I was honoring Mark's memory by protecting our daughter, rather than betraying it by seeking revenge against Luke. The week before I implemented my plan, Luke's treatment of Anna reached a new low. Anna had been working on learning to tie her shoes, and she was so excited when she finally managed it that she ran to show Luke, who was watching television in the living room. "Daddy Luke. Look, I tied my shoes all by myself," she announced proudly, sticking her foot out to show him. Without even looking away from the TV, Luke said, "Good for you. Now go bother someone else. I'm busy." Anna's face fell, and she looked at me with confusion and hurt. I could see her little mind trying to process why the man she called daddy wasn't proud of her accomplishment. That night, as I tucked Anna into bed, she asked, "Mommy, why doesn't Daddy Luke like me anymore?" It was the question I'd been dreading, and I knew I couldn't deflect it anymore. "Anna, some people don't know how to love children the way they should," I told her gently. "That's not your fault. You are lovable and wonderful and smart and kind. When people can't see those things about you, it means there's something wrong with them, not with you." "But he used to like me," she whispered. "He used to sing me the dragon song." "I know, sweetheart. Sometimes people pretend to be different than they really are. But you know what? You don't need anyone to like you to be special. You are special because of who you are." As I left Anna's room that night, I was more determined than ever to execute my plan flawlessly. I consulted with a family attorney who confirmed that my state allowed one-party consent for recording conversations, meaning I could legally record Luke without his knowledge as long as I was present. First, I contacted Luke's largest client, a successful restaurant chain owner named Michael Torres. I arranged a meeting under the pretense of planning a surprise appreciation dinner for Luke's excellent service. During the meeting, I carefully mentioned some inconsistencies I'd accidentally noticed in our household finances that didn't match Luke's claimed income from his business. Michael was a sharp businessman, and he immediately understood my implications. "Mrs. Morrison, are you suggesting Luke has been irregularities in his accounting?" I handed him copies of the financial documents I'd gathered, along with proof of the offshore accounts. "Mr. Torres, I think you should have your accounts independently audited. I found these documents by accident, and I'm concerned there might be problems." Michael's face went white as he reviewed the evidence. "This son of a bitch has been stealing from me for 18 months, he whispered. "Beth, this is enough evidence to put him away for decades." I contacted all 6 clients Luke had been stealing from. Each meeting was carefully orchestrated to look like a concerned wife who had accidentally discovered potential problems. I never directly accused Luke, I just presented the evidence and let them draw their own conclusions. Next, I reached out to Jessica Chen. I called her, introduced myself as Luke's wife, and told her I needed to discuss something important about Luke's treatment of Anna. We met at a coffee shop, and Jessica was clearly nervous. "I don't know why you wanted to meet," Jessica said, fidgeting with her purse. "Luke and I are just friends." I smiled and pulled out my phone, playing an audio recording of one of their more explicit phone conversations that my investigator had captured. Jessica's face went white. "Jessica, I know about the affair," I said calmly. "I know about Luke's plans to divorce me and abandon Anna. I know he's been using you to spy on my family through your mother. What I need to know is whether you're aware that Luke is a criminal." I showed her the evidence of Luke's embezzlement. Jessica started crying. "I didn't know," she whispered. "He told me his business was doing really well, that he was making all this money legitimately. He said once he divorced you, we'd travel the world together." "Jessica, Luke is going to prison," I told her. "The question is whether you want to go with him as an accessory, or whether you want to help ensure he can't hurt anyone else." Jessica agreed to cooperate. She provided me with additional evidence of Luke's crimes, including recordings of conversations where he discussed his plans to frame me as an unfit mother. She also revealed that Luke had convinced her mother to report concerns about my parenting to Child Protective Services, though Mrs. Chen had refused. The final piece of my plan involved my parents. I called them one last time, telling them I was getting divorced and might need help with Anna temporarily. Their response was predictably cold and cruel. "Beth, we told you not to contact us," my father said. "You made this mess, and we want nothing to do with cleaning it up. Don't call again." "Please," I begged, making my voice sound desperate. "Anna is your granddaughter. She has no one else." "That child stopped being our granddaughter the day you remarried," my mother said coldly. "We have our own lives to worry about." I recorded everything. Their willful abandonment of their own granddaughter, their refusal to provide any support or assistance, their complete lack of empathy for a child who had lost her father and was being emotionally abused by her stepfather. The endgame began on a Tuesday morning. Luke left for work as usual, complaining about Anna's breakfast noise and demanding I control that child. Anna, now 6 years old, hugged me extra tight that morning, as if she sensed something big was about to happen. Starting at 9 a.m., I began executing the final phase of my plan. Over the course of 3 hours, Luke's 6 major clients contacted the police to report embezzlement, each armed with the evidence I had provided them. At 11:45 a.m., the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit received a comprehensive package of evidence documenting Luke's offshore accounts and money laundering activities. At 12:30 p.m., the State Accounting Board received formal complaints about Luke's professional conduct and criminal activities. At 2:15 p.m., Luke was arrested at his office on multiple felony charges. But I wasn't done. The next morning, while Luke was being held pending arraignment, I called a press conference. As the local news media gathered, I stood with Anna beside me and told our story. I explained how Luke had targeted me as a vulnerable widow, pretended to love my daughter to gain my trust, then emotionally abused a child who had already lost her biological father. I played audio recordings of his cruel comments about Anna, read excerpts from emails describing his plans to abandon her to foster care, and presented evidence of his systematic financial crimes. Luke Morrison is not just a thief, I told the cameras, my voice steady and clear. He's a predator who specifically targets vulnerable families. He manipulates grieving widows and abandoned children for his own financial gain, then discards them when they're no longer useful. Anna and I are not his only victims. The story exploded across local and social media within hours. Luke's mugshot was on every news site, along with details of his crimes and his cruel treatment of Anna. The story resonated with people, particularly other single mothers who had faced similar vulnerabilities. Within days, the story had gone viral on social media platforms. #JusticeForAnna began trending locally, with hundreds of people sharing their own stories of predatory partners who had targeted vulnerable families. Local news stations picked up the story, and I was interviewed by 3 different reporters about Luke's systematic abuse and manipulation. The response was overwhelming. I received dozens of messages from other single mothers who had experienced similar situations, thanking me for speaking out and giving them courage to leave their own abusive relationships. Several local attorneys reached out offering pro bono services for any additional legal matters, and a children's advocacy group asked me to speak at their next fundraising event. But the media attention also brought unexpected revelations. 2 other women contacted me through the news station, both claiming they had been victimized by Luke in similar ways before he met me. The first woman, Maria Santos, had been a single mother of twin boys when she met Luke 4 years earlier. He did the same thing to us, she told me over coffee, tears streaming down her face. He was wonderful at first, helped with the boys, even talked about adoption. Then after about 6 months, he started complaining that they were too loud, too expensive, too much trouble. When I confronted him, he told me I should choose between him and my sons. Maria had chosen her children, and Luke had disappeared from their lives overnight. But not before stealing $15,000 from Maria's savings account and destroying her credit by opening accounts in her name. The second woman, Jennifer Kim, had an even more devastating story. She'd been a widow with a teenage daughter when Luke targeted her family. He convinced me that my daughter was manipulative and trying to come between us, Jennifer explained. He gradually isolated me from my friends and family, then started emotionally abusing both of us. When my daughter tried to tell me what was happening, I didn't believe her because I trusted Luke more. Jennifer's daughter had run away from home at 16 to escape Luke's abuse. I haven't spoken to my daughter in 3 years, Jennifer sobbed. She won't return my calls. Luke destroyed my relationship with the most important person in my life, and I was too blind to see it happening. These conversations confirmed that Luke was a serial predator who specifically targeted vulnerable mothers and their children. The pattern was always the same: charm and manipulation during courtship, followed by systematic emotional abuse designed to isolate and control his victims. I shared Maria's and Jennifer's stories with the police and the FBI, providing them with additional evidence of Luke's pattern of criminal behavior. Maria's financial fraud case was reopened, and Jennifer's testimony helped establish Luke's predatory pattern for the prosecutors. The media coverage also prompted Luke's former business associate, Paul Smith, to come forward with information about Luke's early criminal activities. Paul revealed that Luke had been embezzling money from their shared accounting practice 5 years earlier, and that he'd only discovered the theft after Luke had already stolen $75,000 and disappeared. I never reported it because I was young and scared, Paul explained to investigators. Luke convinced me that we'd both go down if I exposed him, that I'd lose my license for not catching the embezzlement sooner. I was a fool to let him get away with it. This information helped prosecutors establish a much longer pattern of financial crimes, potentially extending Luke's prison sentence significantly. But the most satisfying part of the media coverage was watching how it affected the people who had betrayed Anna and me. My parents' situation became even worse as the story gained national attention. Their names were mentioned in several articles as the heartless grandparents who abandoned their grieving daughter and orphaned granddaughter. My father's former business partner publicly distanced himself from my parents, and my mother's church formally asked her to resign from all volunteer positions. The social ostracism in their small town became so intense that they couldn't go to restaurants, grocery stores, or community events without facing criticism and judgment. My father's attempts to defend their actions to reporters only made things worse. "We were trying to teach Beth independence," he told one persistent journalist. "Sometimes tough love is necessary." The reporter's follow-up question was devastating. "Sir, what kind of tough love involves abandoning a 4-year-old child who lost her father and was being emotionally abused by her stepfather?" My father had no answer, and the clip became one of the most shared segments of the entire news coverage. Jessica Chen faced her own consequences beyond the criminal charges. Her employer immediately fired her when the embezzlement was discovered, and her professional reputation in the accounting field was destroyed. Several of her clients filed civil lawsuits seeking damages for her theft, and her personal relationships crumbled as friends and family learned about her role in targeting my family. Mrs. Chen, Jessica's mother, was devastated by her daughter's actions. She came to my house one evening, weeks after Luke's arrest, to apologize in person. "Beth, I am so sorry," she said, crying on my doorstep. "I never knew what Jessica was doing. She told me she was just friends with Luke, that she was helping him understand how to be a better stepfather. I would never have helped them hurt you and Anna." I believe Mrs. Chen's remorse was genuine, but I couldn't risk maintaining a relationship with someone whose daughter had been instrumental in our victimization. "Mrs. Chen, I know you meant well," I told her gently. "But I have to protect Anna now. I hope you understand." She nodded through her tears and handed me an envelope. "This is for Anna's college fund," she said. "It's not enough to undo what Jessica did, but it's all I can offer." Inside the envelope was a check for $5,000, probably a significant portion of Mrs. Chen's savings. I decided to accept it, not because I needed the money, but because I could see that giving it helped ease her guilt about her daughter's actions. The legal proceedings moved quickly once all the evidence was compiled. Luke's attorney initially tried to negotiate a plea deal, suggesting that Luke's crimes were victimless financial offenses that should result in restitution rather than prison time. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Tracy Fisher, Ray's daughter, as it turned out, demolished that argument. "Your Honor, Luke Morrison is not just a white-collar criminal," she argued during one court hearing. "He is a predator who systematically targets vulnerable families, steals their financial security, and psychologically abuses children. His crimes are far from victimless." She presented testimony from Maria Santos, Jennifer Kim, and Dr. Evelyn Morse about the lasting psychological damage Luke had inflicted on multiple families. Anna's therapy records were submitted as evidence, showing the significant trauma Luke had caused to a child who had already lost her biological father. The judge, the Honorable Karen Stewart, was clearly moved by the evidence. "Mr. Morrison, your crimes represent a particularly cruel form of predation," she said during sentencing. "You have systematically targeted grieving families and exploited their vulnerabilities for your own financial gain, while inflicting lasting psychological damage on innocent children. This court finds your behavior reprehensible and deserving of the maximum penalty under the law." But the real payoff came when the story reached my parents. My cousin Jennifer called me that evening. "Beth, your parents are freaking out," she said, barely containing her laughter. "Everyone in town has seen the news. Your dad's car dealership is getting boycotted because people are calling him a heartless grandfather who abandoned his granddaughter. Your mom had to quit the church volunteer committee because the pastor told her she wasn't representing Christian values. They're social pariahs." My parents called 2 hours later. "Beth," my mother's voice was shaking. "You need to make this go away. Tell people we were helping you. This is destroying our reputation." "Mom," I replied, my voice ice cold. "You told me never to contact you again. You said Anna wasn't your granddaughter anymore. Why are you calling?" "Please," my father begged. "We made a mistake. We were just scared and didn't know how to help. But this media attention is ruining us." "You mean the same way you ruined a 4-year-old child when you abandoned her in her time of greatest need?" I asked. "The same way you ruined me when you refused to help your own daughter escape an abusive marriage?" I hung up on them. Luke was convicted on 14 felony counts of embezzlement, money laundering, and financial fraud. He received 15 years in federal prison with a possibility of parole after serving a minimum of 10 years. His assets were seized to pay restitution to his victims, and his accounting practice was permanently shut down. 3 months after his arrest, his professional license was formally revoked following a disciplinary hearing. Jessica Chen received probation in exchange for her cooperation, but she moved across the country shortly after Luke's conviction, unable to face the social stigma in our community. The civil lawsuits were even more satisfying. Luke's victims sued him for treble damages, and I was awarded a significant settlement from the court-ordered restitution fund for the emotional distress he caused Anna and the financial fraud he committed against our family. The settlement was enough to secure Anna's future education and provide us with financial stability. My parents' social standing in their small town never recovered. My father's car dealership lost so much business that he had to sell it at a loss. My mother's friends and church community continue to judge them harshly for abandoning their granddaughter. They moved to another state 18 months after Luke's conviction, unable to rebuild their reputation. But the best revenge was watching Anna heal. With Luke gone and our finances secure, Anna blossomed. She started therapy with a wonderful child psychologist who specialized in trauma recovery. Slowly, her nightmares stopped. She began laughing again, playing with friends, and excelling in preschool. The withdrawn, frightened little girl Luke had created was replaced by the bright, confident child she was meant to be. We moved to a new town where no one knew our story. Anna started kindergarten in an excellent school district, and I returned to college to finish the nursing degree I'd abandoned when Mark died. We built a quiet, stable life together, just the two of us. Anna still remembers Mark, and we keep his picture in our living room. Sometimes she'll tell me stories about her angel daddy and how he watches over us. But she no longer asks for the dragon song, and she no longer wakes up crying. She sleeps peacefully in her princess room, surrounded by books and toys and drawings of our family, just the two of us, happy and safe. Luke writes letters from prison sometimes, claiming he's sorry and wants to make amends. I throw them away without reading them. Anna doesn't know they exist, and she never will. As far as she knows, Luke was a mistake we moved past, and now we're building something better. My parents have tried to contact us a few times, sending cards for Anna's birthday and Christmas. The cards go in the trash unopened. Anna doesn't know they exist either. She knows she had grandparents who weren't kind to us, and that we're better off without them. When she's older and asks more questions, I'll tell her the truth, that some people aren't capable of love, but that doesn't diminish her worth or our family's strength. People often ask if I regret remarrying so quickly, if I regret trusting Luke. The honest answer is no. That marriage, terrible as it was, taught me that I'm stronger than I ever imagined. It showed me that I could protect Anna from anyone, including people who should have loved and protected us. It proved that we don't need anyone else to be a complete, happy family. Anna and I are building a new life based on honesty, mutual respect, and genuine love. She's now 8 years old, reading at a 5th grade level, and dreams of becoming either a veterinarian or a princess. She hasn't decided which yet. She has friends, hobbies, and a mother who would move mountains to protect her. Luke Morrison thought he could prey on a desperate widow and an innocent child. He thought we were weak, disposable, convenient stepping stones to his next scheme. He was wrong. The truth is, revenge isn't always about dramatic confrontations or explosive revelations. Sometimes it's simply about refusing to be a victim, protecting the people you love, and building something beautiful from the ashes of other people's cruelty. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well, raising a happy child, and knowing that the people who tried to destroy you are facing the consequences of their own choices. Anna and I are proof that families aren't just defined by blood or legal documents. They're defined by love, protection, and commitment to each other's well-being. Luke Morrison learned too late that when you threaten someone's child, you're not just facing one person's anger, you're facing the absolute determination of a mother who will do anything to protect what matters most. And that, as he discovered, is a force you never want to underestimate. Today, Anna and I are planning her 9th birthday party. She wants a princess theme, naturally, and she's invited 12 friends from school. We'll play games, eat cake, and celebrate how far we've come together. Luke Morrison will be just a distant memory, a cautionary tale we survived and overcame. That's the kind of revenge I can live with, building a beautiful life despite the people who tried to tear us down.